Welcome, everybody, to the Grueling Truths AFC South Preseason Preview, where we will look at all four teams, give our prediction on who's the team that's going to win it, who might surprise. Make sure you go to BetMGM to check out the top sportsbook for betting on the NFL. You get all the futures bets right now. The Houston Texans are favored to win the AFC South. The odds are like plus 110 right now. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I'd like to welcome in Dr. Jim, as we discuss the AFC South today. How you doing, Doctor?
I'm well. Thanks again for inviting me to the show. I appreciate it.
All right. And we will start off probably with one of the teams that will be battling for last place, the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans adopted a bold strategy this offseason, implying that they will go on a postseason run or hoping they'll go on a postseason run with an inexperienced quarterback in Will Levis.
Right.
After firing head coach Mike Grable, hiring first-time coach Brian Callahan. If you're a Bengals fan, you know all you need to know about Brian Callahan. Gone are stalwarts from this team: Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, Danico Autry. In their place, the Titans made significant upgrades, especially a wide receiver, by signing Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd. They also bolstered the backfield with Tony Pollard on a 3-year, $21.8 million contract, shored up a hideous offensive line with Lloyd Cushenberry on a 4-year, $50 million deal. Additionally, they strengthened their defense by acquiring cornerback L'Jarius Sneed from the Chiefs, locking him up with a 4-year contract. With these new weapons at his disposal, Levis could be poised for a breakout season. But I think, Jim, there are legitimate questions here that the second-year quarterback needs to answer this season after they ranked dead last in pass completion last year.
I agree. And I think the things that you've mentioned are going to be problematic for them doing much to get better. I don't think that losing Henry and gaining Pollard is a move up. I think that, like you said, getting Ridley and Boyd, that's nice. You got a second and a third receiver. Ridley last year, I think, was 1,000 yards and about 13 yards per catch, maybe 7 or 8 touchdowns. Boyd, not quite so good, but he's your third guy, and he's played that role well in Cincinnati. And like you said, the offensive line was not good, and they have done something to make it a little better. The problem will be is everyone in this division is trying to catch Houston, who I think is the team to beat, and also did some things to improve their offense, which was not abysmal. They finished maybe 12th or 13th in total yards and in points per game. So Tennessee's got a lot of work to do with a second-year quarterback and a first-year head coach.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is the defense, I think, is going to be in shambles. The loss of Autry is significant, and I don't think the D-line's going to be as good. My other question is, how good is Brian Callahan? He will be calling the plays now. I don't think he was in Cincinnati, even though they called him the offensive coordinator. I have a lot of questions at head coach for them. But my biggest issue is I think Mike Vrabel's an outstanding football coach. And I think they let that team just kind of disintegrate. Ryan Tannehill was a solid quarterback. You had an all-time running back in Derrick Henry. They never really had a great offensive line. So I think the Tennessee Titans will struggle this year. And it's going to come down really, Jim, to Will Levis, because there are enough weapons here. If Will Levis is the real deal, that the Titans could surprise people.
They could, but he's going to need protection so that he can figure out the defense he's looking at, and I'm not sure he's going to get that. And Pollard is good. He averaged 4 yards per carry last year. He did get to 1,000 yards, but in a 17-game season, that's not quite the accomplishment it once was. So if he plays, Will plays very well, they can get past the 6 wins from last year. But I don't see this team getting to 10 wins, which seems to be kind of what you have to have. If I remember correctly, every team in the league last year that had 10 or more wins made the playoffs. And so that seems to be the goal. I don't think this team has the ability. Quite frankly, I have them stepping back. They won 6 games last year, and I looked at their schedule and what you've talked about. I think they win 5 games this year.
Yeah, I think Will Levis has the ability to be really good, but I don't think he's going to be really good. And if he was great, I mean, if you throw Burrow or Mahomes on this is an 11-win team. There's enough weapons offensively to score a lot of points. He's not those guys. I think there's somewhere between the 5 to 7 win, if they're lucky, 7 wins. So I agree with you more at the 5. Now, the Indianapolis Colts, that's another team that has quarterback issues because, I mean, let's face it. I mean, when you look at the Colts, the Shane Steichen era last year, I think he exceeded expectations for this team. Anthony Richardson, of course, got hurt early on because that's what happens when you have a running back play quarterback. So, but they were one dropped pass away from making the playoffs last year. But the departure of Gardner Minshew, I think, is going to hurt this team because I don't think Anthony Richardson makes it through the season. And I'm not just saying if he gets hurt. I mean, I don't think Anthony Richardson's very good. I mean, they say he showed a little bit of promise. That promise was basically with running the ball from everything I saw. You
Right.
lost in the offseason. You still have Jonathan Taylor, which I think is going to be crucial to, to Richardson. I think Zach Moss is a big loss. And I don't think you have a solid backup to Taylor now. So Taylor's going to have even more pressure on him. It's going to be harder to keep him healthy. I think the offensive line, which was once one of the best offensive lines, if not the best offensive line in football a couple of years ago, has slowly went downhill. I think they do have 2 or 3 very good wide receivers. I think defensively, you're missing probably a safety and a corner to have a really good secondary. I think you do have a top 10 defensive line for the Indianapolis Colts. But this is a team where Anthony Richardson would have to be an absolute stud for them to equal the win total they had last year. And I'm sorry, Gardner Minshew, as of right now, is a lot better than Joe Flacco.
Yes, I agree. And I think that with Ross being gone, like you said, and he was their leading rusher, if Taylor can do something in the 1,150 to 1,200 yards rushing, it might take pressure off Richardson, and perhaps he can develop into more of a passer because, like you said, he's sort of a run first. He's a big kid, and he's sort of a run first quarterback, and that will work for a while sometimes, but eventually you're going to turn the corner and meet an NFL linebacker, and it's going to happen like last year. He only played 4 games.
Or as Lamar Jackson showed us, you can be great during the regular season, but when you get to the playoffs at some point, you're going to play a team that's good, and that team's going to be able to defend you running the ball, and then you've got to throw it. And if he's got to throw it, he's going to fail because he's not any good. And I mean, the fact is, at Florida, he was in college, he wasn't very good. And the Colts still draft him as high as they did and put their future on him, which I think brings us to the biggest issue with the Indianapolis Colts, which is Chris Ballard, who's been there forever. He's made some decent moves from time to time, but he's never really built this into a contending team. By contending, I don't mean just to make the playoffs, because now you've got 7 teams that make the playoffs in a 17-game season. Right. I mean, it's been a while since the Colts were a contender for the Super Bowl. That would have been back in the Andrew Luck years. And really, even back then, that was screwed up because you never had offensive line. So I think for Chris Ballard, this is a team that has to make the playoffs and has to possibly win the division. I would think for him to keep his job after as long as he's been there and come up short so many times, and the draft picks have not been great.
I agree, and I think I believe they went 9-8 last year, and I'm not sure they get to 9 wins. I don't know that.
No, I don't think there's any way they get to 9 wins.
Yeah, I think they also drop a little bit, and part of that will be that Houston, again, is clearly the team to beat. The Colts, I think they lost too much from too many places to be able to improve unless Richardson does something that we're not expecting.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen for Colts fans. So quit wishing it will, because it's not. And really, the Colts roster, I mean, for the Colts to win this division, Richardson would have to be better than Trevor Lawrence and C.J. Stroud. And there's not a world that exists where he's going to be better than C.J. Stroud. And the Houston Texans just have flat out a better team with more weapons. All right, I agree with you. I think the Colts are somewhere in the 6 to 7 or 8 wins. 8 wins if Anthony Richardson is decent. All right, next up, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars, who they have Trevor Lawrence, who at times has looked good. Yeah. But for some reason, they have put a huge gamble and bet with a huge amount of money on Trevor Lawrence that he's going to be an elite quarterback. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. They started last season on fire. Looked like they might even be the home or have home field advantage throughout the playoffs at one point. Right. I believe they were 8-2, 8-3. Right. But then they lost 5 of their last 6 games. Their sole victory in that stretch came against the Carolina Panthers that won 2 games all season. That cold streak caused them to miss the playoffs. And the biggest question, I think, heading into the season is Trevor Lawrence. He was the number 1 overall draft pick in 2021, and he failed to build on what was, I will say the entire 2022 season was impressive for him, but that last 9 or 10 weeks was impressive. Then you had the playoff win over the Chargers where they came from behind and won. They played Kansas City tough. You thought maybe this guy's getting it. But, I mean, he hit a wall last year. And he hit that wall at 8-3 also, and he hit it hard. Now, they did get the acquisition of first-round pick Brian Thomas and veteran Gabe Davis. The Jaguars should post big offensive numbers. They also signed center Mitch Moroz, who I think will shore up a struggling offensive line. The Jaguars hired a new defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, to replace Mike Caldwell, which is a significant upgrade, I think. And then you had the free agent addition of Eric Armstead, which I think boosted defense. Now, although that Jaguars offense is strong, I think that defense is still going to need major improvement to be a major contender. And I don't think there's enough talent in that locker room to beat the Texans for the top spot. And I hate to give away my picks at the end, but this division, you talk about the AFC West and how Kansas City had the biggest divide in a division. When I looked at these rosters to do this show, we'll get to the Texans in a minute, but I think the biggest divide in any division is this one. I think the Houston Texans run away with it. And if you're a Bengals or Chiefs fan, the scary thing would be with the division they're in. The Texans will have a legit shot to win 12 or more games and be the number 1 seed because this division's not very good. What's your take on the Jaguars? Am I missing something here?
No, I don't think you are. I looked at their schedule. They were 8-3, like you said, lost 5 out of their last 6. Now they lost 4 in a row, but those games were against 4 teams that had winning records: Cincinnati, Cleveland. I think Baltimore was in there. Tampa was in there. 3 of those teams went to the playoffs. And so they hit a stretch where it was tough, but they didn't do well. And this season coming, we'll know about the Jaguars after 4 games. September will tell the story because they play 3 road games out of their 4 games. They play Miami, they play Buffalo, they play Cleveland. It's a very difficult start to the season. If they can come out of September at 3-1 or even 2-2, they have a shot at the playoffs. I don't think they're going to be as good as Houston. I think you're right. I think Houston wins this division handily. But, Jacksonville, could they get to 10 wins? It's possible because, they should beat the Colts and the Titans 2 times each, or at least they have to. And maybe they can split with Houston. Probably not. But if they go 4-2 or 3-3 in the division and then come out of September with at least a 500 record, that will be the key to them, because after that start, and it's a tough one. I think it's the toughest September in the NFL based on last year's records. They have a shot at then perhaps doing just the opposite of what they did last year and finishing strong.
Yeah, I think the Jaguars do have a shot at a wild card. If C.J. Stroud stays healthy, I don't see the Texans losing this division. That brings us to the Houston Texans, who upgraded big time. They're the reigning AFC South champions. They enjoyed tremendous success last season. They were the biggest surprise of the season last year, probably. And instead of resting on those laurels, they significantly improved this offseason. Now, General Manager Nick Caserio had a playoff caliber roster and bolstered it with multiple starters, including 3 recent Pro Bowlers. On offense, they added a reliable running back in Joe Mixon. They added an elite wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. My question with Diggs is he's an elite wide receiver, but is he really a great teammate? A lot of things happened in Buffalo. So that's always, you bring in a great player, but there's some questions on whether maybe he could be a little bit of a cancer. And these additions, C.J. Stroud had a good enough season. You could put him in the top 3 or 4 for the MVP last year, even make a case for him being the MVP, just because he took a team as bad as the Texans and took them to the playoffs, but he was the offensive rookie of the year. And to think about Houston, though, that was impressive, that separates them from Chris Ballard's Indianapolis Colts. They focused on defense also. They signed a 4-time Pro Bowl edge rusher and Danielle Hunter, a defensive end and Nico Autry, and a linebacker in Al Shair, who's coming off his most productive year. Additionally, Houston drafted 3rd-round offensive tackle Blake Fisher, who I really like. He provides extra protection for C.J. Stroud this season. And the Texans, I think, are going to prove they're a real deal. I think they are one of the top 3 teams in the AFC with the Bengals and the Chiefs. I think the Bengals, Chiefs, and Texans, I think that's where your Super Bowl team probably comes from. But I think they run away with this division.
Yeah, at this point, I don't see how they don't. And I think as far as Diggs is concerned, it's a good question. But he's coming from Buffalo as that football culture into Houston, and Houston's football culture has been revitalized with a very good first-year coach, a rookie of the year.
I think he's beyond a good coach. I think that guy is a great football. If you get, and I can defend myself because if you watch our NFL preview show last year, I actually picked the Texans to win the division because of Stroud and the new coach. And I actually got made fun of by Steve Risley, who we're hoping Steve's foot heals up. That's why he's not been on the show the last couple times. And, Dan Kornhauser. But, I mean, they're almost always wrong, and I'm almost always right. So that's not really saying anything.
Right. Yeah, so I think that adding him to Nico Collins, who's also an excellent receiver, and Mixon should start. He really should.
Tank Dell. I mean, they're loaded.
They are. The skill position of this team now is as good as any in the AFC. I even like their rookie tight end, kid out of Ohio State. He's big, he's strong. He played 5 different positions in high school and college. So his ability to understand the game and his size, he's got great speed for his size, terrific hands. And I think that if he has a chance at starting as a rookie, we'll see, because that was the one thing about them last year. Their tight end position, they had good tight end play, but not great. And now if you can upgrade that as well, this becomes a team that they were 12th or 13th in yards per game and in points scored. I think they finish in the top 10, maybe in the top 6 or 7 points per game, yards per game. And if you add that to a defense, as you said, that got better, this is a team that can win a dozen games, I think.
Yeah, and I would like to put a misnomer on the anytime Jim talks about an Ohio State player, he's an Ohio State fan, and we all know how those people are.
Where did C.J. Stroud go to school? I forget.
Where did he go to school?
Wait,
you finally got a quarterback that wasn't a bust out of 30 attempts. That's a good job. Thanks. The last guy that wasn't a bust out of Ohio State at quarterback was Art Schleister, but he was a gambler and an alcoholic. So,
hey, you got to have a hobby.
Yeah, and he had a couple of them, and now he's in jail. All right. So, yeah, I think we agree here. Houston Texans first, Jaguars second. I will say Titans third, Colts last.
I understand that, but I'm going to go with last year's finish. Same 4. I think I'm going to go Houston, Jacksonville, Colts, and Titans. This is a division full of brand new coaches, brand new quarterbacks, but I think that Houston, without question, has done the most to make the transition from those other places into the pro level easier. And like you said, terrific. That combination down in Houston and what they've added to it, honestly, they should be looking to play in February. That's what their goal should be.
Yes, they should, and the Colts and Titans won't be. But I like the Titans here because I think Will Levis is better than Richardson, and I think there's enough weapons there that if Levis stays healthy, I think the Titans finish ahead of the Colts. I just think the Colts need to move on from Chris Ballard because if they don't do it soon, they're not going to have a team left. Because to me, it's a team that a few years ago was a playoff team, and everybody ripped Phillip Rivers, but Phillip Rivers had a pretty good season with them. And same thing with who was the other one they got from the Eagles. Even come on, Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is better than what they got right now. I mean, he just is. I mean, Anthony Richardson is a dude at the University of Florida senior year was 5-7 and completed like 53% of his passes. The NFL is much more difficult than college. Yes. And most guys that get drafted, even in the first round anymore, are failures. So actually, if I just sit here and say that every first-round quarterback is going to fail, I'm going to have a success rate of probably about 80% because 20% make it. I mean, there's just not that many guys. If 5 guys this year, how many quarterbacks were drafted in the first round? 5 or 6?
Yep.
And 1 or 2 will be solid NFL starters probably.
Yeah, I think I like Penix. I think he's got a great attitude. He throws a good pass. I think he put the right players around him. I'm worried about Caleb Williams. I think he did really well against teams in college that weren't very good, and when he played good teams like Notre Dame, he didn't do so well. I'm not sure Chicago made the right move there. We'll talk about that when we get the NFC North.
I don't think they did either. And I think this quarterback class, there'll be guys drafted in second, third, fourth round that'll be better than any of them because I love Michael Penix.
Yeah. What about
And as anybody
you like
knows, he
Daniels?
played at IU. I've worked with Michael Penix, but he's a great kid. That knee worries me. I mean, it worries me a lot because he's had a lot of injury issues over the last 4 or 5 years. And it also worried me the lack of his ability to deal with Michigan's secondary and the way they changed coverages. And I know that Michigan team, I'm sorry, that team up north, as you Ohio State fans would say, they had a scary ass defense last year. And they've had a scary defense the last 2 years, but they put the clamps on him pretty good in that championship game. He had no answers. That worries me a little bit.
Yeah, he has growing to do. I like Daniels too as a quarterback. I think both those guys have the potential to be as good as Caleb Williams and maybe better. They're bigger than Williams. Williams is listed at a height that I'm not sure he is. You know, I think they've got him listed at 6'1". He doesn't look like he's 6'1" to me. He's athletic, but like you said, the move from college to the pro level is so difficult that you can take some of the best college players ever, and they get to the pro level, and everybody around them is bigger, stronger, faster than they're used to, and it makes a huge difference. We'll see how this quarterback class does. There's potential to be several good ones, but like you said, most of the time guys don't pan out, and you end up with
You know, the guy I like the most is Bo Nix.
He certainly made the right move when he went from Auburn to Oregon. That was a gigantic risk for both him and Oregon, and he made the most of it. I just don't think. I think the Broncos are going to struggle. I think he'll be good, but it's going to take a while.
I think he'll be fine. I think his footwork is a little crappy. He needs to be a little bit more disciplined with the footwork. But, I mean, the thing to me is his pre-snap reads, he's great with. He is great at pressure. He avoids negative plays. I think the footwork needs some or has some issues. Yeah, why my phone keep ringing? That's the rest just alone. That's why I've got that on there like that. So anytime Sly calls, that's when you hear the Rocky music. But I think he has starting caliber tools in his arm and his legs. And the other thing is this: Sean Payton is kind of an asshole. Let's just put it out there. But Sean Payton has had a lot of success with quarterbacks.
Yes.
I don't know why he decided to just piss all over Russell Wilson last year, because Russell Wilson had a good season.
Yes, he did.
And I don't know why you wouldn't want Russell Wilson. I also think this. I think the biggest bust out of all of this is Drake May. And I think Drake May will make it so New England's new head coach, which is, let's face it, a diversity hire, will be gone within a year or two.
Yeah, New England, honestly, when I looked at all this, I think New England has a shot at being the worst team this year. They
get the first pick, so they'll be able to replace Drake May next year.
Right. They won 4 games last year, and quite honestly, the division will be tough. They have to play the AFC North, I believe, and so they got some tough games, and they're not going to be very good. I think
Bill Belichick got really lucky that they decided to let him go.
Yeah, it was the right time. I think you're right.
Yeah, because really, with the talent they had last year, the fact that they won 4 games and were in most of their games will tell you how good a coach he was. They will not touch 4 wins this year, and they will be blown out in most, I believe.
They're going to lose a lot of football games, and like you said, with the schedule they have, they're going to lose a lot of football games. Bad. They got 6 games in their division. They're going to be 7 to 10 point underdog in every game.
What's according whether Aaron Rodgers shows up or not?
I think he will. I've seen it. I've seen him talking, and I've listened to some others, and I think he's ready to play football and prove that he is one of the greats, and maybe to even have a shot to get the Jets into the playoffs and advance them.
Well, I think the Miami Dolphins, with the talent they have, if they keep them and fire the head coach, will win a Super Bowl someday. But I really think as long as McDaniel's there, I don't think there's a chance of hell of them going to a Super. I think the dude is just. Did you watch Hard Knocks with him last year?
I did not.
He's a goofy little dude, and I just don't know if the way he coaches translates, because there's a lot of cringe moments when you hear him talk to his team. And those are grown-ass men that have played football for a long time, being coached by a dude that doesn't look like he ever played football. But what the hell? All right, so that'll lead into this. We'll go AFC East next show. We'll have to find out what Jim's schedule is. Keep an eye out. The show will be scheduled at least a day ahead of time, and we will probably go live then. We've had some technical difficulties the last 2 days, which made us record these. Make sure you go to BetMGM for all your betting, for betting on any sport, but especially NFL futures. Like I said, right now, I think the Houston Texans are like plus 100 to win the division. That's when you know you're a pretty solid favorite. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications on YouTube. Go to Facebook, follow us there, and follow us on Twitter at Grilling Truth. Follow us on X at Grilling Truth. It's kind of like, the Washington Redskins. They'll always be the Redskins to me, and X will always be Twitter to me. But, Jim, got anything to say before we wrap it up?
No, I appreciate being on the show. Look forward to talking about the AFC East. I'm giving away who I think is going to finish last, but my pick for who finishes first will probably be different than yours.
I think everybody expects the New England Patriots to finish last. And it couldn't happen to a nicer guy than Robert Kraft. So he'd go to a massage parlor or something and relieve his pain. But, all right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. For Dr. J, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been watching and listening to The Grilling Truth.